Great. Today on the Surviving the Human Experience podcast, we have a very special episode for our listeners. We are excited to welcome Eileen Day McKusick to the show. Eileen Day McKusick is a researcher, writer, inventor, practitioner, educator, and speaker in the field of therapeutic sound, the human biofield, and electric health. She has a master's in integrative education and has been studying the effects of sound on the human body and its electrical system since 1996. Eileen is the originator of the sound therapy method, Biofield Tuning, and the founder of the Biofield Tuning Institute, which conducts peer-reviewed studies on the human biofield. She's the author of the best-selling books, Tuning the Human Biofield, Healing and Vibrational Sound Therapy, and Electric Body, Electric Health. So without further ado, let's welcome Eileen to the show.
Hi, Kristin. Great to be here with you.
Yes, thank you for taking the time today. I know you're super busy, so we're very excited you're sharing our time. So I want to share a little fun fact before we jump in with the questions. So this is a fun fact for our listeners. So Eileen grew up in a small town in Connecticut, right down the street from where I grew up, which was super cool when I realized that. When I was traveling back to Connecticut to do a book signing, I happened to do a signing at the Vanilla Bean, not knowing the history that Eileen had with Vanilla Bean. And so I was excited that God's source energy has made the stars align so that we could have this conversation today. So let's jump in. So, your background is so fascinating. You've gone from being a small town girl to being a woman on a quest for optimal health and healing. You're a thought leader in the electric health space. So, for our listeners who may be new to what you do or just getting familiar with you, can you just share a little bit more about your history and your journey?
Sure. Well, I started the Vanilla Bean back in 1989 when I was 20 years old with two of my older brothers and my mom. And the restaurant grew from having just 16 seats. Within 3 years, we had doubled the size of the kitchen, we tripled the size of the dining room. And I'd been working 100-hour weeks and was so burnt out. And my back was such a mess. And I had TMJ and I was living off sugar and coffee. And it was not a good situation. And so I actually threw in the towels, left my brothers to deal with it without me. And I went to massage therapy school in Boston, and I was gone for a year and really wanted to be more involved in health rather than food because the restaurant business isn't exactly the healthiest business to be in for many reasons. And
Mhm.
uh, and I was prepared to just go out in the world and continue my education in the health field. But then our mom got sick. She developed a brain tumor, and unfortunately, she was dead within 6 weeks of being diagnosed. So my mom left some pretty big shoes to fill, and I ended up having to go back to Connecticut, back to the restaurant. But I kept doing massage therapy part-time on the side and became interested. I started reading books about science and spirituality, health and human potential when I was 18 years old. And
Mhm.
I'm a really voracious reader. And so I had read a whole bunch of books. And for people who are like that, researchers by nature, you know that it's sort of a trail of crumbs and one thing leads to another and to another. And my trail of crumbs led me to the idea of vibrational medicine and the
Mhm.
idea that even though our senses tell us that the world around us is solid, it's pretty clear at this point that it's really light. It's vibrating light. That really everything is just packets of energy and information. And at the final analysis, there is really no stuff. And
Mm.
so that led me to the idea of using color and sound and music in healing. And I went out, this was in 1996. So there weren't a lot of resources, but I found every book I could on the
Mhm.
topic. And then I started, then I got a catalog in the mail, a Gaia catalog that had a set of tuning forks for healing in it.
Mm.
And I ordered them on an impulse and started playing with them with my massage therapy clients.
Okay.
And even not knowing what I was doing, because there were really no instructions, there was no guidance.
Mhm.
I just started experimenting. And I'm, many years in the kitchen teaches you to be pretty free with experimentation.
Mhm.
And so I just applied the same principles to just playing with these and seeing what happened. And even not having a clue what was going on, people were reporting that they were out of pain, that they were sleeping better, that they were less anxious. And then they'd come back for a massage and they'd be like, do that sound thing again. And so I just started exploring with the forks and then never really stopped. So it's been 28 years now. And in that time period, I went to college as an adult and wrote a master's thesis on the topic. The discoveries I made didn't make sense within the context of our cosmological story about the nature of life. We're really educated into a paradigm of solid, liquid, and gas. And what I was encountering with the tuning forks, what I didn't understand in the beginning was the fact that the body has an electrical system as well. And it's this electrical system that interacts with sound, because we all know that sound moves us, right? It can move us to tears. It can move us to get a whole bunch of stuff done or to dance or sound is very powerful in the way that it moves our body. And that is absolutely this system that we don't learn about, that most people don't even realize that we have an electrical system. And it's one of those places where we're missing the forest for the trees, because pretty much everybody knows that their heartbeat is electrical, that their brain waves are electrical, your nervous system is electrical, right? Your blood carries a charge. You look at all this and you're like, oh, wow, there's actually electric current flowing through our bodies. And anything that has an electric current running through it has a magnetic field around it. And that's where my work ended up leading me, where I started just working over the body, but then discovered that there was a whole bunch of stuff going on in the magnetic field. And I actually spent a period of 4 years from 2006 to 2010 mapping this field. And that's really the cornerstone of my work, what I call the Biofield anatomy map. And so I go into that in detail in both of my books, Tuning Human Biofield and Electric Body, Electric Health.
Mine right here.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so it's a really useful tool that basically associates different imbalanced states of mind and emotion with specific areas of the body, and really sort of created a model where the body is inside the mind rather than the other way around. It's because our electrical system is what I would call our mind. It's our conscious mind. It's where our subconscious mind are, where our memories are stored. I find memories in standing waves in the field around our body, which is a really radical departure from the way that we currently look at it.
Right. Wow. Well, you got my next question answered for us already. I was going to ask you about electric health and what it is and why it's so important. So you started to jump into that a little bit. So would you like to expand a little bit more about why we need to be aware of it and what it can do for us?
Well, it's really primary because if you come back to this idea that everything is packets of vibration and information, we're really every one of us is really like a beautiful Stradivarius that's been terribly mishandled. And as a consequence, we're all out of tune, and we have rhythms running through our circuitry that are maybe running too high and too fast, or too low or too slow. Things that have shut down completely, things that are on a completely different sheet music than the rest of the body. And so my work with tuning forks is really tuning humans, and the discovery that we're essentially self-tuning instruments. And what I do with my tuning forks is I sort of wave them around you until systematically, till I find a spot where there's a lot of dissonance, and I'll reflect that back to the body. So you and I know, like, if we haven't seen a mirror in a while and we get to one and our hair is a mess and we have a poppy seed in our teeth, we'll immediately go to put ourselves back in order. And so the tuning forks are going to resonate with whatever rhythm is off, because that's the way they work as an acoustic instrument. And then they're going to be like a mirror reflecting that to the body. And then the body uses that reflection to put itself in order, because a tuning fork produces a steady tone, a steady rhythm, and the body orients itself against that and brings itself back into a more harmonious rhythmic expression. So most things that you can think of are rhythmic or tension based. I
Mhm.
know a lot of my colleagues in the alternative health space point to toxins as the problem for a lot of people's poor health. But what I've really found is that it's tension more
Mm.
than toxins, because if a body is supple, it will manage toxins.
Okay.
Just for an example, one of the things that I've observed in this process of helping people to relax subconscious tension from old inputs, even ancestral and cultural
Right.
inputs can make us contract. And when we're in a state of contraction and resistance, then we're creating resistance in the flow of our electrical current. And that
Mhm.
is going to drop our overall voltage. So a lot of people who have low energy have a lot of deep tension, and they're not breathing, because most
Mm.
of our electrical life force actually comes from our breath. And one of the
Mhm.
reasons why we like to go to ionized environments like the beach or the woods, because there's a greater abundance of light and
Right.
electrical energy that then we breathe in, right? Because when
Mhm.
your blood becomes oxygenated, it gets bright red because it's full of light, because we
Mm.
actually live in an electromagnetic environment. Our atmosphere is a plasma, and it is full of light and electricity.
Makes
And
sense.
right, so we can go for
Mhm.
weeks without food, so we're not getting our primary source of electrical energy, our life force, from food. We can
Mhm.
only go a few minutes without breath, right? So the
Right.
more tension we have, the less expansive our breath is, and the
Mhm.
less life force is getting to every part of us. Our potential is expanded and flowing, not contracted and in resistance. So this is really work to just help you to let go of that resistance and enter into more of a flow state where all of your rhythms are running right. And I just want to give an example.
Mhm.
Um, Heavy metal toxicity, right? There's a number of
Yes.
people out there suffering from heavy metal toxicity. Well, we're
Mhm.
all exposed to heavy metals in the air, and it's everywhere. I've got a whole bunch of amalgam fillings that I probably didn't
Mhm.
need from a crooked dentist when I was a kid.
That's before they knew better.
Yeah. Uh,
Mhm.
so I don't have any heavy metal issues, right? But what I've observed in my clients, the ones who accumulate heavy metal are the people who hold back expressing anger.
Mm.
And if you think
Wow.
about the tension that you have to create in your body in order to hold back an emotion, you're creating tension across all of those membranes. Your body isn't going to be able to move heavy metals around. And so you're going to start to accumulate them.
That's
So,
profound. I would
yeah,
not have even put the two together.
yep.
So you mean I can stop doing all my heavy metal detox shakes and I can just wave the forks?
Yeah, and relax. But one of the things that I have seen is that sometimes people can have a really big detox response, because all of a sudden they relax, those membranes let go, and blah,
Right.
out come the heavy metals. So we always ask people to take binders
Mhm.
when if they're receiving biofield tuning, and keep
Mhm.
going with your cilantro or whatever else you're
Right.
doing. Right. But you have to kind of reflect back on that. And we're like, well, where and how do I hold back anger? Where did I learn to do that? When did that pattern start? Do I see my mother or my father doing the same thing? Or was one of them like ridiculously angry and that made me think it was bad form? And so I just don't
Mhm.
even go there. You know what I mean? Because we can easily kid ourselves that we're not even experiencing it with sugar or chocolate or wine or ice cream. Well, I'm not angry. So
How did you know I love ice cream? You really called that one.
I
Awesome.
get it. It soothes the liver, actually. Ice
Mhm.
cream is a liver pacifier. And so
Mm.
it's a
That makes
go-to
sense.
to soothe a hot liver or anger. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. All right. Well, we won't talk about all those, liver supports I take either then. You're calling all my cards today. Oh my gosh. Right. So I've been very fortunate to experience the healing benefits of sound therapy along my journey. during some of my more critical times on my path for my health space, I used sound bowls, gongs, didgeridoos, and then came the tuning fork. And when they first started using them on me as a client, I was like, what in the world is this thing? This is very different. I was unfamiliar, didn't know what they do, didn't know how they work, but I could feel something was taking place in my body. I knew instantly, like all of a sudden my body felt like it's shaking. I'm feeling all emotional, like so many things were happening. So I did realize there was something to these. So you use a variety of methods and tools in your research and with your clients. And I noticed you're doing the fall 2024 Sing the Body Electric with the brothers Corin. And so I did sign up for that. So I'm excited about that event. But I'd like you to talk a little bit about the event, the power of the voice in the healing process for mind, body, and spirit.
Mhm. Well, I'm feeling inclined to go into the long story about this because I think other people will probably be able to relate to
Okay,
that.
let's do
Um,
it.
yeah, so I think singing and dancing are very natural human expressions that humans in all cultures across all time have done. And in our culture, we've created a different kind of experience with music where we have stars and then we have the rest of us who can't sing or don't feel comfortable singing. Many people had traumatic experiences in their life in their childhood where their voices have really been shut down.
Mm,
And everywhere I go, I see that people really want to sing but have all kinds of blocks in the way, like all kinds.
mhm, mhm,
There's so many self-limiting beliefs that come in here and create a contractive experience for people when they go to sing, which is actually really sad because singing, and especially singing with other humans, is one of the most joyful things that you can do. Not
mhm.
only joyful, but invigorating, enlivening. It's just, it makes you breathe. It gets the blood flowing. It just feels good to do sound healing on yourself from
Mhm.
the inside with your own voice. It's the
Yeah.
most free, easy, accessible way to
Mhm.
enjoy the benefits of sound healing is with your
Yeah.
own voice. But very few people are at liberty to claim this enjoyment. And so the way that I came into all of this was when I was 20 years old, I received very clear guidance that I needed to learn how to sing.
Mm.
And when I get guidance, and I'm sure people can relate to this, when it's something that really needs to happen, it just keeps coming in, right?
Yes.
It's like that
Yes.
Harry Potter scene
Yes.
when letters were coming down the chimney. It's just
Mhm.
sort of like beating you over the head until
Yes.
you do it, right? And so
Mhm.
that was the experience I had. But I was very resistant to it because I was very non-musical. As a kid, I grew up in a non-musical family. Nobody played any instruments, nobody really sang. And then traumas that I had under the age of 4 had really kind of created a dyslexic, disassociated, disembodied experience of myself. So I was the kid in music class who was always clapping on the offbeat and singing off key and squeaking my clarinet. You know, it was the one that everybody just wanted to just be quiet, right? And so to receive this guidance to sing, I was like, well, you're kidding me, right? But
Yes.
I did it. And I went to my very first singing lesson. And the woman was playing middle C on the piano, and she was just trying to get me to go la, and I couldn't. I felt like I had hands around my throat. My stomach got all in knots. My knees started knocking. My knees had never knocked before. I'm like, oh, this is what knee knocking is. My palms
Huh?
got all sweaty. I thought I was gonna throw up. And then I finally like croaked out this horrible little sound and then burst into tears. And this woman was just looking at me like she was in no capacity to manage what was going on there. And I left and I was like, oh my God, like what happened to me precognitively that
Mhm.
led me to this place of like massive terror around emoting in front of someone,
Mm.
right? Just like
Right. That's
really,
huge.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I carried on, and I over the
Good.
course of the next 7 years, I had 7 voice teachers in 7 years, and the first 5 told me that I was tone deaf and that I would never
Mm.
be able to sing.
Oh,
And
wow.
And I was like, you're just a bad teacher.
Mhm.
Onward. Uh, so I'm pretty persistent, I guess. But what ended up happening was when I went to massage therapy school, I started receiving body work, and I discovered that I was incredibly tense, and I had no idea that I was carrying around this tension because I'd spent so much of my childhood in sort of a contracted,
Right.
defensive state with four older brothers. Uh,
Mhm.
that I had no, it had just become so normal for me. My oldest brother pricked me with a pin on Christmas morning when I was 2 months old. And so it just kept going from there. Um, so I was so unconscious. The tension I was carrying was unconscious. So
Mhm.
what a lot of people don't realize is that in Chinese medicine, the liver opens to the eyes, right? That's something a lot of us know. You can tell the state of the liver by the eyes, but the kidneys, which hold shock and fear, open to the ears. And if
Mhm.
people's kidneys are clenched and like overactive, if you've really had trauma, it impedes your ability to hear properly.
Mm.
So my
Wow.
tone deafness was a consequence of like noise in the signal and resistance in my kidneys.
Wow.
And as I started to get massage and relax and
Mhm.
breathe, and I started to do yoga, my kidneys relaxed and my ears opened up. And I also used my very first set of tuning forks, which were C, D, E, F, G, A, B. I would put the stem against my little ear flap and
Mhm.
hum with it. So I would able to match the pitch through feeling it vibrationally in my head. And so I
Wow.
taught myself the placement of all those notes through the tuning forks, which is interesting. And so
Oh
by the
my
time,
gosh.
yeah, so by the time I got to my seventh teacher, she was like, "You can hear and sing fine." So that,
Oh,
yeah, so that
how
was
about
pretty,
that? Well, let me
yeah,
reach to the first teachers and said, so that statement you made,
yeah, yeah.
tell me what I can't do and I'll show you what I can do.
Exactly.
How
Right.
about
So,
that?
yeah. So if anybody, has encountered that same kind of problem, I just want to encourage you to keep going. Don't stop. Don't take no for an answer. Find the joy of expression. But
Mm.
so anyway, at that time, and around my seventh teacher, I had a little tiny band with my husband and some friends, and we weren't performing or anything, but we were just getting together, and I was doing spoken word and doing some toning and just kind of
Mhm.
getting in a groove with it. And then I got pregnant and I got really sick. And then my whole life kind of took a turn into motherhood and tuning
Mhm.
forks. And I spent a whole bunch of years raising kids and doing tuning forks and not doing anything with music or singing. And
Okay.
then a few years ago, I got the download again that was like, okay, it's time to take everything you've learned about sound, about intention, about healing, and bring it back to the voice.
Mhm.
And through a kind of serendipitous situation, I learned about the brothers Corin, and I reached out to them. And immediately, like in our first Zoom meeting, we just knew that we were kin, that we were siblings, that we were family. Like we just knew it. We knew that we'd done this before, whatever it was that we were going to do. And they offer a program called the Songwriter's Journey, where they take people who want to overcome their fear of singing, fulfill a desire to write songs and record them, just as a
Okay.
kind of for whatever purpose for people.
Mhm.
And so I started on that with them in the end of 2019. And the plan was that I was going to go back to Ojai where they are and record songs. But then COVID happened and
Mm.
I couldn't get back to Ojai. And our work kind of took this turn into what we now call Sing the Body Electric, where together we discovered what we call the sonic anatomy. And the
Mm.
sonic anatomy is a system of currently 42 different tones. And these tones are like baby sounds, or like da, ma, pa, gu, gi, ga. But they resonate in very specific areas of the body. We got tones for the feet, the legs, the ovaries,
Oh,
the
wow.
small intestine, the lungs, the hands. And we lead people through this experience of toning these sounds in these places and in these zones. And I use the analogy of like a pipe organ and how we've got places where like the keys don't work or the
Mhm.
pipe is clogged. Every time we shut down ourselves, or we shut down an emotion, or we pulled ourselves in, or made ourselves small, or been victims of some kind of violence, all of those pipes stop functioning properly. And so this is a process of like blowing sound and air through those areas and cleaning them out and opening them up. And
Wow.
so we don't do any singing. We have everybody sing happy birthday to themselves at the beginning, and
Okay.
then we lead them through all of these different tones. And I tune people, and we do breathing exercises. And then at the end, after you've like toned for hours in very
Mm-hmm.
interesting ways, and what's fun about it is it's super sandboxy. So you don't need to be on pitch. You don't need to sound a
Okay.
particular way. Like if you go to sound your liver, for example, so here you go,
Mm-hmm.
the sound of the liver is pa, and the
Okay.
liver relates to father and also the emotion of anger. So if you
Mm.
go to make, and you have had this whole kind of relationship with dad and the emotion of anger, and you go to sound pa in the liver, it might come out sounding like pa,
Right.
because it's all shut down, right?
Right.
This
Right.
kind of funny story. I was listening, a friend of mine put on Drake, who's a, I don't even know
Yep.
what
I know
genre.
Drake. Yep.
Okay, so Drake. And I don't know anything about Drake. I've
Teenagers.
never listened to Drake before. I was like, I can't listen to this guy. And he said, why? And I said, because he's got a father wound that's really bad, and his liver is all contracted and it's coming through his voice, and I just can't listen to it. And he was like, Drake is very open about his difficulties with his father. I'm like, well, I hear it in his voice because his
Okay.
liver is flat,
Yeah.
right? He needs to do some
Wow.
playing with us.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so we would do it like a bunch of times. Go and make the sound, keep adding air, add more air until it can come out like pa, just pa, just a normal sound. And you think about 42 of these sounds and like what might be collapsed and opening it up. And then when we sing happy birthday at the end, everyone is like soulful and playful and engaged. And they actually like move from a place of this sort of awkward stiffness with their own voice
Mm-hmm.
into a place of joyful, playful expression without
Wow.
singing, right?
That's singing. Yeah.
Without singing. So it's like this back door way into that joyful freedom of expression and play, because our bodies are instruments and they're
Mm-hmm.
actually really fun to play with, right? And so,
Yes.
so I would say for me, biofield tuning really helped to get me to a place of greater freedom, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
when I first started receiving tuning from my first students, I'd been doing the work for 14 years, but I'd never received it. And
Okay.
and so I was still in this place of like kind of chronic pain, chronic
Mm-hmm.
fussing, low level blood, it just wasn't
Right.
where I wanted to be because I still had a lot of this deep tension. And over the years, I've actually at this point received thousands of tune-ups and unfurled and unfolded in a great many ways. But it
Mm-hmm.
was my work with Sing the Body Electric and the Sonic Anatomy and Isaac and Torald that really took me over the finish line into a place of freedom. Like now I can sing in front of people. I mean, in the beginning, working with them, I didn't even feel comfortable singing in front of them. And now I lead sing-alongs when we do our live events. So last day we sing some songs together. And to me, that is, I don't think any of us can be truly free and truly healthy and truly authentically ourselves, because your healthiest self is your most authentic self,
Mm-hmm.
unless we're free in our voice and we can enjoy singing with other humans and not be inwardly divided and split and full of judgment towards ourselves.
Yeah. Makes sense. Whew, I can't wait. I'm excited. I saw it and I'm like, I'm signing up for this now. I called my
Yay.
mom. She's like, I'm signing up too. I'm like, I know it's going to be a whole family event. We're all going to
Yay.
sing together. It's going to be
I love
great.
it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump back to the tuning forks now. So you shared that you've been working with them for a little over 28 years. So can you explain in layman's terms for our listeners who might be brand new to tuning forks, what are they and how do they work?
Mhm. Well, there's a couple different kinds of tuning forks. There's forks that are unweighted, and that's the kind that you would think of to tune an instrument, how they used to tune instruments, right? You have an A440 or 432, and people would tune against that because it's a pure tone. A tuning
Mhm.
fork is simply a tone generator. And even
Right.
though a lot of times we hear the word tuning fork, there's something in the culture that makes people kind of recoil to that. I'm like, tuning forks for healing. It sounds
Right.
really fruity, right? But when you get past that, a tuning fork is simply a tone generator. And in that way, it's kind of like a musical instrument, like a triangle or something that you bang on and it makes a sound, a chime, a
Right.
bell. Um, and it's a pure tone, right? So they're the unweighted ones that you hear, and then there are ones that have barrels or weights on the end that also produce a specific frequency, but you don't hear it. You
Mm-hmm.
feel it. So that's the kind of fork where you would place the handle on your body and feel the vibration go into it, right? So these are tools that most doctors have. Doctors will use an unweighted tuning fork to test your hearing. They'll use a weighted tuning fork to test for neuropathy. So they're also medical instruments
Mm-hmm.
that have
Mm-hmm.
had a use in medicine for a long time. So they're both musical and medical.
I like that. The M&M.
Yeah, yeah. And then the M's continue because I talk about how they also act like a mirror, like we spoke about earlier. They will initially resonate with whatever distortion is present. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you have a lot of pain in one of your shoulders, the signal that that's giving off is going to sound really different than if you don't have any pain. Right? If you have
Mm-hmm.
sharp pain and I hold the tuning fork over it, it's actually going to sound sharp and we're going to hear it together. And then I'll bring it over to the other shoulder. It's going to sound totally different because
Makes sense.
everything in our body is in motion.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in motion makes waves, and waves propagate. They move away from their source, right? So we've
Mm-hmm.
all had the experience of getting a bad vibe off of somebody. Like, how
Right.
do we know that? Well, we sense it because
Right.
their vibrations are traveling through the air and
Right.
we're feeling them on a
Yeah.
subtle level, right? So as these emanations that are coming off the body intersect with the tones of the fork, it
Mm-hmm.
now the body, it produces what are called very low amplitude, very high frequency waves, right? We can't hear them, you can sense
Mm-hmm.
them. But a tuning fork also produces overtones. We use aluminum tuning forks that produce a very broad overtone and undertone spectrum. So you're not just hearing the primary, but you're hearing all of the octaves above it, all the way up into the range where you can't hear. And what
Mm.
happens is the waves coming off the body intersect the waves coming off the fork. And that intersection, the information of that intersection precipitates down through the octaves into the hearing level. So it actually becomes a tool that allows me to hear the vibes coming off of you.
Mm-hmm. Makes
Every
sense.
emotion has a particular frequency signature or sound to it, as does every pathology. So if I bounce sound like sonar off your liver and I
Mm-hmm.
listen to ping back, someone who has fatty liver, the quality of the sound in that ping back is going to be really different than a healthy liver,
Mm.
right? So they
Yes.
act diagnostically to help find through echolocation
Mm-hmm.
parts of the body that aren't moving properly. And as
Okay.
a consequence of not moving properly, the waves that they're producing are not coherent. They're incoherent. They're dissonant.
Mm.
So,
Nice.
so the tuning fork acts like a mirror to
Mm-hmm.
find these areas. It acts like a metronome because it's
Mm-hmm.
providing a steady rhythm for the body to balance its rhythms off of. And
Mm-hmm.
then, somewhat oddly, it also acts like a magnet. It acts like a magnet. And this was
Oh,
one of
wow.
my first discoveries that was so odd to me. I was like, what law of physics is determining the fact that I can move what feels like a magnetic blob in the atmosphere of the body? I can move it
Mm-hmm.
around with a vibrating tuning fork. Do you remember those toys we had when we were kids with the iron filings and the guy, and you could use the stylus to like give
That's a
him,
sketch.
yeah, things like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was able to use my tuning fork like a magnetic stylus and literally move energy around in the magnetic field. What I didn't know in the beginning, and I know now, is that magnetic fields actually guide and inform electric currents. So I use the tuning forks to manipulate the magnetic field in order to shift the way electricity is running through the body.
Mm. Would that be the click, drag, and drop? Because I was
Yes.
going next. I was going to say that
Yeah.
when you described it, I was thinking of the email, and I was like, I'm dragging my email over here to the folder and dropping it in. That's
Yeah.
literally the visual I got when I was reading. I was going to ask you to share about that.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what it is. I call it from the beginning, it has a very much like a click, drag, and drop feeling. Now, our energy is ideally centered along the midline of our bodies. But when we get into bad, out of balance habits, then we end up with energy shifting to the side. For example, the tendency to say yes when you mean no, put other people's needs ahead of your own, be a caretaker and accommodator to the deficit of your own well-being,
Mhm.
creates an energy buildup in the right shoulder area. So most people that I work with that have right shoulder pain have too much current running through those wires. There's too much
Okay.
of their energy is directed in this imbalanced way. And so I
Mhm.
can find that in the magnetic field. I can find the history of it. I can find the tendency towards it. And I can hook in, I can click on that
Mhm.
magnetic accumulation of mind energy and drag it to the center and drop it in. And then the electricity, because it's following the magnetic field, will migrate to the center. And so by
Mhm.
doing this, I can often get people out of pain, even when they're really high on the pain scale, in pretty short
Mm.
order, because I'm just rerouting or rewiring the way electricity is flowing through the body.
That's incredible.
It's pretty
I
wild.
don't know why everybody isn't doing this, honestly. I'm baffled. Like when I started reading all of your information, your books, your research, I was like, holy cow, it was like the light bulb just went off. I'm like, that's the missing piece. I've
Yeah.
spent years studying all this stuff, trying to figure out how this all works. And I'm like, she has the answer. So, oh, I
Yeah.
love that you're sharing that. All right. So I recently attended the Sonic Slider First Aid Live course that you just did the other day. Super awesome. You shared so many different tools and techniques and instances when you could use the sonic slider. You also shared that it's your mission and vision to have one of those sonic sliders in every first aid kit, which I 100% am here for that. So, can you talk to the listeners a little bit about what the sonic slider in particular could be used for in those first aid situations?
Sure. So the sonic slider is one of the weighted tuning forks that we use. So you don't hear it.
Yeah.
We have 5 different weighted forks and 5 different unweighted forks. There you go. That's the sonic slider that we use in Biofield Tuning for a total of 10 forks. And the sonic slider is it's interesting because I have over the years created many prototypes and worked with many different frequencies, many different fork sets. And I was looking for something actually to use on the face to because
Mm,
I'm not the kind of gal that would get Botox or surgery,
mhm.
Vermont crunchy organic
Yeah.
kind of gal. And
Totally
so
understand. I'm with it.
and so I wanted to find a frequency that was pleasing to use the handle to just rub on my face and neck, kind of at the end of the day after a stressful day to just kind of iron out the face.
Yeah.
And so it was vanity really was the primary purpose behind the creation of this fork. And I had a handful of prototypes made based on different mathematical configurations, some based in sacred geometry, but then I made several based in the Schumann resonance. Now,
Mhm.
for those people who don't know, there is a constant sort of low level background pulse within our electric atmosphere that moves at around 7.83 beats per second, 7.83 hertz. And that's when our brain waves are actually in like a really quiet, calm, meditative state. So,
Okay.
so it's a frequency that's outside of us, but it's also a potential frequency inside of us,
Mm.
and one that the body is very familiar with and attuned to. Now, you can't make a 7.83 hertz tuning fork because it would be like 4 feet long. The lower the frequency, the longer the fork. Like the lowest
That would
frequency,
be really funny to see with a fork,
it would
right?
be dangerous. I don't think I could
You
carry it
coming
that
out on the stage like, "Look at my new invention."
far.
Be long. Short people are crying like, "It's bigger than me."
I don't know. Maybe you're inspiring me to maybe try to figure
I think it
something
would be awesome.
out.
Like, I could totally see it right there with you on a stage. I think it'd be great.
Well, this one is actually, so it's 7.83 times 12. It's a harmonic or a multiple, and it's
Mhm.
93.96 hertz. And so I got this batch of like 6 different prototypes made for this very specific
Mhm.
application. And I knew the moment that I activated that frequency and put it on me that it was exactly what I was looking for, because not all frequencies are created equal. For
Right.
example, 7.83 times 13 feels completely neurotic and disruptive and
Mhm.
uncomfortable, right? So
Right.
so this is a very specific frequency that the body just loves. And
Mhm.
And so because the body receives it, brings it in, it's just shown itself over the years to be super useful for so many applications. So many people call it their magic wand
Mm,
because so some of the things that I shared in that class is that if you get a bug bite or a bee sting and you immediately put this vibration on it and let it run down all the way, it takes
mhm,
the itch out. It makes them shrink and even disappear. Uh, Things like bumps, bruises, headaches, contusions, stomach aches, period cramps. Um, the list just kind of goes on and on. I mean, I managed to fill 2 hours and didn't even get to everything that I wanted to
right.
because there's so many ways to apply it. I told a story about how I was taking a 5-gallon water jug out of the back of a tailgate and it had
Mhm,
fallen over. So when I opened the tailgate, it came rolling out and I put out my left hand to stop it from hitting the concrete. I smashed it up pretty good. And so I went inside and I put the sonic slider on it immediately. And I
mm,
could feel like the shock lift up out of it. I could feel the pain sort of loosen up out of it. It helped my body to like just reset itself,
mhm,
right? To kind of bring you
right.
back to baseline faster.
Mhm.
And so it's such a useful thing. And we've gotten so many incredible stories from people about all the different ways that they've figured out how to use it. So have you had any opportunity to use it for first aid?
I just got mine in 2 weeks ago. I think it was about 2 weeks, maybe a week and a half. And, I told my daughter, she's like, "Oh, here my mom goes again." I said, "I'm taking it with us to the basketball games this season," because I'm always the mom that's running down on the floor at the high school games when you're not supposed to, like, pushing energy to the children. Like, we had a girl fall that had asthma, and she had a whole asthma attack, and I'm like, "Whoop, we gotta get her here until the, paramedics come." So I told her, I said, "Don't be surprised when I whip out the tuning fork."
They're so
So
helpful in first aid. They really are.
yeah.
And I think that they should be in, emergency rooms because most people, when they end up in emergency room or urgent care, there's an emotional thing going
Mhm.
on as
There
well.
is.
You
Mhm,
know, and the breathing is so off rhythm, and it's a way to just get people to like settle back into their body, get their breathing back into rhythm, to take people down when they're just like, whoa. But
right.
what the thing that's cool about sound is it's sort of like an adaptogen. So if your
Mhm,
energy is too low or too slow, it'll bring it up. If
mhm,
it's too high and too fast, it'll bring it down.
mhm.
So it has this very balancing effect on our system.
I love it. Well, I can't wait to play with mine. I've been watching the videos and, running around the house with the children. They're like, "What are you doing now, mom?" Like, "Don't worry about it. It's gonna be great. Everybody else is gonna be at the doctor. You guys are gonna be good. We're gonna survive through anything because we have all the tools here." So
Nice.
I always love to ask my guests if they have a client story or two that they'd like to share with listeners about anything miraculous or exciting that's happened in their journey and in their practice. So do you have, one or two stories? I'm sure you have many, but any that really stand out that you're like, this was so incredible, I have to share this.
Well, what's coming to my mind is kind of something a little bit different. And that is that I have 11 teachers of the Biofield Tuning method. So we have thousands of practitioners and students all around the world. So if you're curious about it, you can find someone. And everybody does the work at a distance too. That's
Mhm,
maybe a whole other conversation, but you
mhm,
don't need someone nearby.
right.
Um, and so my teachers have been giving, receiving, and teaching biofield tuning, some of them for 8 years, and then some a little bit less. And what I've witnessed with all of them in the practice of making coherent sound a lifestyle
Mhm,
is that everyone has become healthier, more fit, more attractive. They've left bad relationships and entered into good relationships. They're all sort of radiant and shiny and healthy human beings that
mm,
have transformed from, we've all transformed through
yeah,
this work
mhm,
from being stuck inside of ourselves in different ways to really opening up to our healthy potential, like the best version of ourselves,
mhm,
right? So,
yes.
and then I would say not just my teachers, but my office team. Part of working at my office, you get a biofield tuning session every month for free. We get quarterly spa days.
Oh, I
um,
love it.
yeah, and so the focus here is really on you're feeling out of sorts, you got this thing coming up, just get a tune up, keep getting tuned, keep getting groomed. We've all kind of popped into the time space continuum downstream of a big mess. Like,
Hmm.
I ask people, like, did your parents do any kind of like healing work? Did your parents model effective emotional management? Like, I've asked that question to thousands of people.
Uh-huh.
Nobody's ever raised their hand, right? And yet
Right.
somehow we landed in this generation of expecting ourselves to like get it all together
Yeah.
without realizing that we're doing the work not only of our own self, but the
Hmm.
generations that came before us that would
Yes.
just drink or smoke or be abusive or whatever. Like,
Hmm.
we've come out in a place where there's a lot of dysfunction that we've inherited, and honestly kind of a lot of work to do. A lot of
Hmm.
people are like, oh, I've been working on this, why haven't I healed yet? I'm like, you don't, that probably goes back 20 generations in your
Right.
lineage. you know
Right.
it's not
Yes.
easy to turn this boat around,
Yes.
and it's kind of like, if you really want to get healthy and you really want to realize the best and most amazing and most gifted part of yourself,
Hmm.
sound is a great pathway to do that, because it helps to relax you, it helps to open up that space, and the more
Hmm.
that you immerse yourself in it, the more coherent, light, bright you become, right?
Hmm. Yes.
So yes, I could tell you lots of stories of this person had depression or anxiety or this or that. But really, I think what's more important is that there's so many people, especially people who listen to podcasts,
Hmm.
whose soul is driving them to find freedom,
Yes.
right? I mean, that's why we want anything, the car or the money or anything. We want to feel free.
Hmm.
And so sound, whether it's through tuning forks or bowls or gongs or what have you from outside of yourself, as well as your own voice from the inside, I
Hmm.
think is the most efficient pathway to that health and freedom that we all want to get
I love that. Thank you. That was a perfect answer.
to. Yeah.
Love it. So my concluding question or statement that I'd like you to share is, if you could share one message with our listeners, one message with the world, what would it be? You sort of touched on it a second ago. You can pick a new one or elaborate if you'd like.
Yeah. Well, I think one of my biggest ahas in this work was through the process of helping people to get in tune, to get the noise out of their signal, to get the resistance out of their flow, to find and amplify their true tone underneath all of that. And I found that when people came into that harmonious expression of their essential self, that they were amazing, that they were great, that they were
Mm,
beautiful, that they were brilliant, like that everybody was. And it kind of was like this weird revelation to me, because I think we've been so conditioned to see ourselves as guilty sinners or not good enough or compare ourselves to others or flawed in some way. And so there's a whole bunch of layers of like self-depreciation
yes.
that people put on themselves, right? And
Hmm.
so we all are kind of walking around in these contracted, even maybe deformed expressions of what we really are, right? The
Hmm.
Stradivarius that's beat up. And so when
Yes.
we reveal the Stradivarius that's underneath, it's amazing. And in everybody. And so not only in my work can I find your traumas and help you to
Hmm.
release those or whatever, but I can reflect back to you your unique beauty, greatness,
Mm,
amazingness. And
mm.
everybody that I've ever seen this in, heard it in, and reflected it back to them has sort of looked at me shyly and said, I knew that. Right. So
Oh.
we know that there's that
Hmm.
greatness inside, right? We
Yes.
do. And
Yes.
so I just want you to believe in your own greatness and your own ability to realize it and to feed it and and it's through your electrical system, by
Hmm.
getting the noise out of the signal, by getting yourself in tune, by getting your voltage up and your signal bright and clear, that part of you emerges, and it's absolutely there and it's absolutely attainable.
So beautiful. Well, I just want to say thank you for sharing your time with us today. I know we're getting to the end of our hour with you, and the messages you shared. I hope everybody goes and signs up for your classes. So if you just want to let everybody know where can they go to find everything you offer. You have so much. So I can't even stay in one space. I'm like, there's classes, there's videos. Where can everybody go and find you?
Yeah, yeah, there's lots.
Yeah.
Okay, so singthebodyelectric.com is where you can go learn about that program. We're going to be in person at Esalen in California in November, but we also have a 5-week virtual course where we're going to take you through all the tones. I know you have to practice them each week. So that'll be that's very accessible. And that's to that singthebodyelectric.com. And then if you're interested in Biofield Tuning, that's biofieldtuning.com and biofieldtuningstore.com, where we've got all the tuning forks, lots of free sessions, and like a whole library of recordings that can be very helpful for people, as well as a directory of practitioners worldwide. So that's all there. And then I have a YouTube channel as well with lots of information and a bunch of free tunings too there. So just go to YouTube and search my name. And we're also on social media, Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing all of that with us. And thank you again for your time today. And for our listeners, thank you so much for taking time to listen to this episode of Surviving the Human Experience. And until next time, be well and stay blessed.